William makes the Springlock suits. Because they seem shittier than the regular animatronics, right? They seem not great.
Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host with the Toast, Rye Toast, here to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's and to kick off Season 2, Episode 1, otherwise known as Episode 70, if you're not going to pay attention to it, because, again, it's pretty much just for a bit. I thought I was going over the timeline prep we've been doing for the past several episodes, and I was looking at everyone we've gathered, right? We've done timeline prompts for Games and Major Events, Michael Afton, William Afton, Henry Emily, Charlotte Emily, Elizabeth Afton, the MCI victims, the crying child, Cassidy, Cassie, Cassie's dad, the mimic, Glitch Trap, Gregory, Vanessa, Dr. Rabbit, and Vanny. I think that's everybody. Like, unless I'm completely blanking on an important character, I think that's, like, if I put all of that together, we just get a timeline. I think that's just how that works. So, if you'll forgive me, I am going to open up a new Google Drive document. And I think this is just going to be me typing together a timeline. I think that's the move. What's the best way to format a timeline? This is going to be a lot of me thinking. Hopefully we get to questions, but I don't know how long this is going to take. But consider this, I guess, my pre-Secret of the Mimic thoughts on the timeline. I want to end this year. I'm holding myself to it. I want to end this year by putting out a timeline. It'll probably be very long, but I wanted to cover from the earliest point to after Ruin. Like, I want to make it like a complete, full franchise timeline. That being said, I want to wait till after Secret of the Mimic to put that out, but I want to make it by the end of the year. Granted, I will say, don't expect too much of me. FNAF's Timeline is a masterpiece and basically a movie. It's not going to be anything like that. It's going to be like a normal video, but longer. Anyway, yeah, I guess we'll just start. I think the most opportune thing to do... what's the easiest way to do this? I think what I'll have to end up doing... Because organizing all these pages is going to be rough because a lot of things happen simultaneously. Maybe instead of... Ooh, I've got an idea. Instead of just a document, what if I make this an Excel sheet? No, I'll make it a PowerPoint. This is huge. PowerPoint makes the most sense. Because now I can go... Before 1980. Well, I'll just go up to 1979. Make that the title. Should I record my screen for this so you guys can actually see what I'm typing up? I probably should. It'll kind of mess with the formatting of everything, but editing Riley can fix it and totally won't mind. I said lyingly. Is this going to shift the whole time? Every time I open any window, it's going to shift a whole goddamn... Okay. All right. But I was thinking if I do a PowerPoint, right? Just to organize my thoughts, I can group everything that happens by time. So, like, I can put what each character is doing, what's going on in that moment, and then that way it can help me to form a cohesive story. Right, so everything that happens pre-1979. These dots I don't need. How do I get rid of these? The dots are just part of the background? That's crazy. Okay, background. All right, so I think I want to, like, establish a good default slide here. So we can have, like... Should I list every character? Maybe. No. I think that's going too far. I think just a bullet list organized by year is the best way to go about this. So something, oh God, what is that font? With the mimic, creation, accident, right? Like that happens on 1979, but Fall Fest has been going on for at least 9 years. I think that's the only information we have for like hard dates. Other than that, Fredbear's Family Diner is established somewhere in the 70s, which like at that point would mean William and Henry are business partners at this point. But like pre-1980, that's kind of it, right? I assume this is going to be the Secret of the Mimic slide. Like, this is where we're going to get a lot of information from Secret of the Mimic, is this slide. So duplicate, move on to page 2. Let's go year by year, right? I think the next important year to cover is probably going to be 83. Because I don't think anything notable happens that I can think of that specifically must happen on 1980, 81, or 82. As far as I'm aware, it's 83. But just to cover our bases, I'll just, instead of doing by decade or by 5, we'll just do until the next important thing. So the slide will cover everything that happens that year and previous. So going back up, go up the top. Dave Afton sees, because this is going back to remember what you saw, right? So I'm thinking Dave just saw an employee being put into a spring-lock suit. But at this point, Sister Location Bunker has already been created because William is watching through the cameras, specifically through Psychic Friend Fredbear. So, okay, so let's back up. William A. creates the SL bunkers to study animatronics and watch over Dave with Psychic Friend Fredbear. Psychic Friend Fredbear. Technically PFF, but I like having to be there. It just makes sense in my brain. So, sees an employee being put in a springlock suit and mistakes it for a stuffing. Can I not capitalize here? Oh, the font's just smaller. William, through PFFB, reinforces that fear to keep him away from animatronics. Because, like, William knows that these are dangerous. And, like, I'm not going into this timeline assuming William, gives a shit about his kids. Like, this isn't a will care timeline. But I do think that, like, at least at this point in the timeline, he wants to make sure that his kids don't die at the hand of them. My basic thinking is even if he doesn't give a shit about them in any way, it's still embarrassing for the company and messy to clean up, right? It's like it's a bad situation for the company and for the animatronics if one of the animatronics kills one of his kids in front of a crowd of people. Like, no matter what, that's a bad thing. So even if he doesn't care, right, it's still good to prevent that from happening. Has Michael watch over him as well, to which Mike bullies Dave out of frustration. I can't believe I gotta watch my kid brother. This sucks. During this time, Dave is shedding agony across Fredbear's and the newly opened Freddy's. So let's go into Freddy's. I might have to No, we can just continue the slides. I was like, I might have to make the font smaller. Fitting everything on one slide is going to be unreasonable. I think what I'll do is like do like that, right? So due to Fredbear's success, William and Henry appeal to investors to get funding for a new venture. So they succeed and they open a public company called Fazbear Entertainment, right? Because this has to differentiate itself from Fredbear's Family Diner, because Fredbear's Family Diner is a private company owned by William and Henry, where Fazbear Entertainment is a public company which owns the Freddy Fazbear character. That's why it's not Fredbear anymore. That's why it's not Spring Bonnie anymore. It's these new characters, Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie the Bunny, right? It's new characters because it is a new company, and just due to copyright and the way things work, because it's a public company and they had a previous private company, they wanted this public company to be separate from themselves. So if it fails, they are not at fault. It goes to the investors retain the assets, right? But, like, in essence, William and Henry are still, they're not necessarily the owners, but they're, like, the head operators of these facilities. And Dave is going to these facilities, because at this point, Dave knows of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy. He has the plushies. So by 1983, this company has to exist. And, like, judging from the coin, like, established 1983, this all makes sense. So this is kind of in the lead up to 1983. This is what's going on. Is there anything else to put up in the lead up? I think we can just go to, I should mention in here the family dynamics. William has 3 kids, Michael, Dave, and Elizabeth. Henry has 1 kid, Charlotte. Michael spends his time fishing at the local lake near their house. This is important, I promise. Live out in the woods. How literal is that? We don't know. And then I'm just gonna, okay, I already have something happens with the mimic. We don't know yet. Likely locked up afterwards until FNAF 6-ish. So I got this. I think we're good to move on to 83 specifically. So duplicate. This one will just be 1983. So a lot of stuff kicks into motion here. So on Dave's birthday, Michael and his friends pick him up and make him kiss Fredbear, which puts his head in the jaws of Fredbear, clamping down, biting his head, resulting in what was then known at the time as the Big Bite. I'm assuming it's later known as the Bite of 83, since we know of the Bite of 87. But we know from the week before, Ralph's like, at the time, we just called it the Big Bite until the other one happened, right? It's kind of like World War I and II. I love the joke, damn, they named it World War I. That's like a little like, pessimistic. I almost said anti-optimistic. That's a little pessimistic to name it World War I. Well, at the time, obviously, the explaining the joke, it was the Great War. And then when World War II came around, it was then renamed to World War I, since they kind of linked directly to each other. The bites don't link directly to each other, but the same idea can be held, where it was the Big Bite until there was another Big Bite to which they needed to denote these better. But a lot of stuff is going to start kicking into gear now. This is, I've said this before, I think this makes the most sense as the inciting incident, because nobody needs to be wanting something for this to happen. This is, like, for the most part, an accident. Like, yes, Michael Afton and his friends caused this with their bullying. Yes, the bullying was so egregious because William Afton was a shit father. Like, yes, there are things that cause this, but there doesn't need to be a motivation, right? This can just be an accident. Whereas, like, sure, could you argue that William just made the Funtime animatronics because he wanted to? Yes, but making an entire line of animatronics built to kidnap children, typically you want a motivation for that. Same with the MCI, and same with killing Charlotte Emily. And as I always mention, because I know some of you in the comments are going to be annoying if I don't, when I say you need a motivation to do these things, I'm not saying a justifiable reason, right? There is no good reason or justification for making the fun times, killing kids. Obviously, I shouldn't have to say that. But when I say that someone needs a motivation to do that, if we're talking about a villain like William Afton, he has his own motivations. He has reasons for the things he does, and it's our job to try to figure that out. Because if he just does it because, why are we trying to figure any of this out, right? Like, if the MCI was just done because he felt like it, then there's no point to it. Because, like, he's just a crazy guy. We don't need all this lore. If we have all this lore, that leans into the idea that there's a reason for it. Okay, that's better. So I've been, the whole rant, I was, like, trying to put lotion on my hands because it's, like, still winter up here. And my knuckles get so dry. So dry. I have to, like, constantly put lotion. I've got, like, a CeraVe, not sponsored, but, like, CeraVe therapeutic hand cream. It's doing okay. It's not as strong as I would like it. It's not like an O'Keefe's or anything like that, but O'Keefe's burns because my hands are so dry, so that's like the one I put on often. That was not sponsored. What is sponsored is Gamersupps. I keep forgetting to plan these out for the podcast, but I promise you, yes, okay, I'm going to be as transparent as possible here, okay? If you use code RYTOAST at Gamersupps, with the link in the description, you get 10% off, and I get a cut of that revenue. I can't say exactly how much because of NDA, but I get a cut of the revenue that they get when you use my code. So I am incentivized to like make you buy this because it directly gives me money. That being said, genuinely, I just drink this shit so much. There's caffeine and non-caffeine versions. And one serving is one scoop, which has about 100 milligrams of caffeine in the energy versions. I drink like 2 scoops of the caffeine, so 200 milligrams of caffeine, once a day around lunchtime. And for the non-caffeine versions, I have like 2 or 3 of this size, which is 2 servings a day. I drink so much of it. Granted, I get a lot of it for free because I work with them. But even if, like, I've paid for some before I worked with them because I think it's like $40 for a tub, which is 100 servings. And, like, think about that energy wise. Like, I think the recommended maximum for caffeine is like 400 milligrams. You should not go over 400 milligrams of caffeine in a day, which is like why a lot of energy drinks stop at 300. And a cup of coffee is like 100 or something like that. So, like, that being said, like I said, one double dose of energy, so it's 200 milligrams. I don't want to double up on energy. That's 100 servings divided by 2. That's 50 days for $40. It's less than $1 a day for me. But look, I don't mean to go on too long. It's a podcast, so I feel like I have actual time to go into it. Whereas, like, for the videos, you need like snappy, quick ads and get back to it. But I liked working with them because, 1, I like the product, and 2, they let me do anything. They really, I've talked to them multiple times. I'm like, hey, is this okay? Hey, is this all right? Can I advertise like this? And they're like, dude, do whatever you want for the advertising. We do not, like, do whatever you want to do. And that's been so refreshing because I won't name names. Fuck it. I'll burn this bridge. Raid Shadow Legends. Look, I did it for the bit once. They are so particular with what they want you to do for an ad to the point where, like, they give you your brief about, like, oh, play footage here, talk about this, do these things, which is normal. But I sent them the draft and they sent it back to me. And they were like, oh, this footage, you need to play this specific footage for 1.5 seconds longer at this timestamp. I was like, excuse me? And they were like one of my least paying adverts. Like, if you're going to be super hyper specific, at least pay me. Like, they paid me so little in comparison. But anyway, rant aside, genuinely, I do enjoy Gamersupps, and it gives me money when you use the code, which is great for me. Back to the timeline. I like putting the Bite of 83 first because the Bite of 83 has the least amount of precursors. It can just happen with no motivations, no previous. The only thing that needs to exist for the Bite of 83 to happen is Fredbear's Family Diner, which most likely existed for several years at this point. Freddy's does technically have to exist because the crying child had those plushes in his room, but like Freddy's as a building doesn't even need to. It could have just been the characters at this point, right? I do think the character encyclopedia mentions that his nightmares are based on him going to Freddy's, which then leans into the idea that that Freddy's did exist, which I think Freddy's existed by 83. I think that's pretty clear with the coin and all the other evidence we have for it. So I like putting his bite first. But all right. So this is a Shatter victim timeline. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. When the bite happens, his life has been so miserable. He's experiencing his greatest fear. This is the worst moment in his life. And in that moment, his mind is literally shattered. And his psyche and soul spreads amongst the anchors he's placed, going into the Silver Eyes when, I believe it's Maria, I could be misremembering, talks about how like she believes that we leave our memories with us, where we leave little touchstones in our life, and that's when you can walk into a room and get rush of that memory because you're revisiting it. He's done the opposite, where his fears and agony is dripping from him, attaching itself to the animatronics and the locations, like when when Andrew in Fazbear Frights is talking about, like, I don't know what was going on. I just remembered that I hated so strongly and I wanted my hate to be on everything. It's like that, but with fear and agony. So then when he dies and his soul shatters, it flees to these anchors, these placeholders. It seeks out any land. And what it seeks out is those anchors that the crying child has placed, which is why there's a little bit... Remember the Ennard? There's a little bit of me in every body. It's kind of like that, where there's a little bit of the crying child in everybody. And that's how... I don't think the crying child possesses Golden Freddy. He doesn't die with Golden Freddy. He dies much later. Which again, like, it's not like the bite, his soul shatters and his body is left lifeless. Because he's alive, ostensibly. But it's that idea of, like, that bite was the symbol. And when he dies, his soul is so frail from that point, it shatters. And then a key point here, while he's still unconscious, William takes him out of the hospital to recover at home. But to experiment, and that's the excuse, but really he's trying to experiment and try to get some reaction out of him. Because I do believe at this point, I will put you back together is from William. It's him looking at the crying child and being like, I can fix this. I can analytically look at this and fix this. It doesn't work because he's an idiot. And when it fails, he doesn't want the press to know. He doesn't want this to ruin the restaurant's reputation. He doesn't want Henry to know he's failed this horribly. So... the crying child's body is buried in an unmarked grave in the middle of the woods near their house, aka the lump from Midnight Motorist. And this is important because in Alone Together, it's established from our main character's grandmother that if a spirit can't find their own remains and their own remains are undiscovered from other people as well, that spirit has trouble moving on. And we'll get more into that if we get to FNAF World on this episode. I want to get this all done in one. I don't know how long that's going to be, but I can't just look at the recording and be like, oh, it's 45 minutes, because, like, there's a lot of silence of me just typing. So, but we're not even halfway done 1983. So check. Okay, so Dave's largest consciousness wanders around lost. This kind of goes back to Alone Together as well, where the grandma mentions that, like, if a spirit can't move on, they just kind of wander around the places they were when they were alive, not really sure what's going on. And that kind of goes to Andrew. Andrew is shattered at the beginning of Fazbear Frights, but he's still talking to Jake. It's the idea that, like, there are pieces of him missing and pieces of his memory he doesn't have, but there's still, like, a primary soul. And that's what we're seeing in the crying child, where, like, Dave is still there, but he doesn't really remember what's happened, and he's just wandering around lost. Think, like, imagine the FNAF 4 day minigames, but with nobody there. Or at least nobody's talking to him directly. That's kind of what he's going through right now. And possibly the FNAF 4 night minigames as well. But I think the ones we see in-game are somebody else's, which we will get to very shortly. So there's that. And then we're going to page back to... I didn't mention this. When Henry succeed owning Freddy Fazbear Pizza, Henry builds a new set of animatronics. The Fazbear OGs. Did I say William made the spring locks? I kind of like that. But I don't think... I did say that. I'll leave that there. I like that. William makes the spring lock suits. Because they seem shittier than the regular animatronics, right? They seem not great. He tries to wake him by inducing horrible nightmares. I'm coming up with this on the spot, but I like this. The original creation of the FNAF 4 testing chambers is to wake up the crying child. Let's recreate his bedroom, recreate the nightmares he always complained to me about, and if we can scare him enough, maybe he'll wake up from his coma. It doesn't work, right? It does not work. Eventually he flatlines. But now he has the FNAF 4 nightmare chambers. These are important. So we'll duplicate this. We're still in 83, baby. Well, this could be slightly after 1983, but for now we're still in 1983. At this point, Michael Afton is listless. He's blaming himself. He's lost all he just can't focus right now. Like he basically killed his brother. He's going through a lot right now. So I think he's nightly sneaking out to Dave's grave and then goes to his fishing spot. I don't think he's fishing, but I think he's sitting by the lake and just watching, right? Like he's in I'm depressed mode. I should go into this. I keep saying fishing spot, lake. So think about the Help Wanted Fall Fest lobby where we have the barn and that giant lake and then the FNAF 4 house on the hill. Combine that with Midnight Motorist, where we have the house in the middle of the woods by that big clearing. My brain, and this goes back to a theory I made where Michael is Old Man Consequences, and that's going to be in this timeline. But it's the idea that Michael Afton was going to this Fall Fest lake to go fishing and relax, and after the death of the crying child, goes to this lake to contemplate and be depressed, right? But this is like his spot, which is why we see it in Old Man Consequences. Anyway... if we think that clearing in Midnight Motorist is where Fall Fest was, then all of this lines up, where we have the FNAF 4 house, the Fall Fest clearing, and the lake nearby, the lake being off-screen in Midnight Motorist. This even lines up with Security Breach and Ruin, where we have that large underground lake next to FNAF 6. If you believe that Junior's is where Fredbear's once was, and when Fredbear's closed, Junior's opened up in its location, and if you also believe that Pizzeria Simulator is built in the old FNAF 6 building, then that places the FNAF 6 building very nearby that massive lake we were just talking about. And if you would say keep digging lower and lower, a lot of lakes kind of, I forget the word, but a lot of lakes trickle into underwater reservoirs. So it would make sense if that large lake we see next to the FNAF 6 area in Ruin is drippings from that initial lake. Is that important? I don't know, but it is worthwhile mentioning. That's kind of why I keep mentioning his fishing spot. Okay, that was a big slide, so I had to just lock in. Okay, so at this point, William is trying to find ways to bring back the crying child. Is it because he cares so deeply about the crying child? Who's to say, right? You know, he's sick and twisted at this point. Who knows what his motivation is for wanting to, but we know he's trying in some way. That's why I think he's building the fun times. His idea is like, if I can recreate the bite of 83, I can study what happened and see if I can undo it. But he needs the fun times, and the fun times are way more advanced than anything he's ever built. So he can't build them, and he needs funding. And he needs funding to build them. So he appeals to more investors and funds Afton Robotics LLC. This is what we see in the Sister Location intro cutscene. That is the business name we see on all the blueprints from Sister Location. So funding secured. Located in his bunker. Make it all right here. Still need someone to build it, though, because those fun times are incredibly advanced. And he can't figure out how to build them. But he knows Henry's a genius. But if Henry sees these blueprints, he'll have the same questions the investors did. He learned that even laymen, random investors who don't know anything about robotics, can look at these blueprints and go, hey, Mr. Afton, why is there why is there like a child kidnapper in your animatronic? If an investor can catch on to that, Henry will see right through him. He needs to trick Henry. He needs to make sure Henry is as desperate as he is. And it's at this moment where William goes to kill Charlotte Emily outside of Fredbear's. This does two things. One, it closes Fredbear's, which halves Henry's revenue, right? Now it's just Freddy's that's able to support him. But two, it takes away Henry's daughter. And now Henry is just as desperate as William is. So in their grief, as he's consoling Henry, he's like, hey, this is going to sound crazy, but I swear I can still hear Dave. And when Henry goes, I think I still hear Charlotte's laugh when I'm around Fredbear's, William leans in and is like, because Charlotte possesses the marionette, what if there was a way to bring our kids back? And then lays into the Fun Times plan. And I'm assuming since Henry is like pretty normal, William isn't letting him know about the whole killing kids thing. It's just, we'll use it on test dummies, we'll experiment, we'll see how it works. Because Sister Location, like Circus Baby's Pizza World, never opens. That's important for this. Like we have to understand the restaurant never opened. But also, this isn't Circus Baby's Party and Rental, because there's that dialogue in the vents on night 1 of Sister Location, which let me grab up verbatim. Why are all the FNAF dialogues on Rap Genius? I've never understood this. Anyway, due to the massive success, and even more so, the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment. Unlike most entertainment venues, our robotic entertainers are rented out for private parties during the day, and it's your job to get the robots back in working order before the following morning. Because this is one paragraph, right? The idea of like, after Freddy Fazbear's Pizza's closed, we opened and we rent out our robots. That's telling me he is talking about Circus Baby's Party and Rental. And Circus Baby's Party and Rental is a separate business entity than Circus Baby's Pizza World. Not to mention, again, I cannot be more clear about this, Circus Baby's Pizza World never opened. So this venue is actively open, and Circus Baby's Pizza World never did. So I'm saying that Sister Location as a game, including Party and Rental, has to happen after a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closes. Whether you think that's the original Freddy's, FNAF 2, or FNAF 1, that's up to you. I think it's after FNAF 2, and we'll get there when we get there, hopefully this episode. We're still in 1983, goddammit. So all this to say, this closes Fredbear's. Freddy's is still open at this point. And the idea is like, hey, not only can we look into saving our children, but this will be another source of income so we can go back to having 2 restaurant income if we have Circus Baby's Pizza World and Freddy Fazbear's Pizza open at the same time. But that's not all that's going on at the same time. A lot happens this year. 1983 is a long year, folks. This is, at this point, I would say, this is 83 to like 1984-ish. 1983 to 1985. We're beginning to move on. But William comes back after killing Charlotte to find that Michael has snuck out again. This is Midnight Motorist. This is later that night. He comes back. He finds out Michael has gone to that place again. That place being Dave's grave. Now, from William's perspective, this is all Michael's fault. And he dares to act like the upset son who's going to visit his dead brother. No, this is his fault. He should be punished for this, right? The idea of like, he'll be sorry when he gets back. He also has these nightmare chambers that he hasn't been able to fully test out because he's only tested them on a kid in a coma. I wonder what happens to a kid when they're awake. 2 birds with 1 stone, baby. He puts Michael into the FNAF 4 nightmare chambers as punishment and to experiment on his other son. This does a few things. Michael is going to be fighting for his life in here until FNAF 2. So for the next 3, like, depending on if this is 83, 84, 85, for the next 2 to 4 years, realistically, Michael Afton is constantly doing FNAF 4. So that's his life now. And we move on to back to William. Plans have been going through. The fun times have been created. Circus Baby's Pizza World is about to open. But the day before it opens, Elizabeth gets in the way. Elizabeth has been very clingy to William Afton and very interested in Circus Baby's Pizza World. But unfortunately, unlike before when he could just sick Michael onto one of his children to have Michael watch over them and keep them out of trouble, Michael Afton is busy in FNAF 4. Elizabeth doesn't have a babysitter. Elizabeth is clingy as hell to William and the new creations. And eventually she gets too close to Circus Baby, to which Circus Baby enters kidnapping mode and scoops her up, but it kills her. Whether this was the specs not working correctly or maybe this is the plan all along, it's unclear. But she dies in there and possesses Circus Baby. William notices this. The eye colors change, and maybe he even hears, we hear Circus Baby talking as Elizabeth. Like Elizabeth talking through Circus Baby in Sister Location. Maybe that happened right away. We're unsure, but we know at least the eye color changed, and William noticed this. Henry falls into this grief over everything happening, but William is like, hold on, possession might be real. Can we scientifically manipulate and study spiritual possession? And this brings us to 1985. All right, that was a big slide. So we're moving on to 1985, the year, the myth, the legend, the missing child incident, the thing that really kicked off a lot of this. I believe the reason William did the MCI was at this point, the fun times didn't work, but he did notice some kind of possession. So he goes over to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and he needs to kill two birds with one stone. Because right now, Henry knows that his daughter died because of the animatronics, and that idiot might confess to the police what happened. He also knows that there might be a way to induce possession if somebody dies in an animatronic suit. So he goes to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and he kills 5 children, well, 4 to begin with, and puts them into the animatronics. He puts Susie and Chica, Jeremy and Bonnie, Gabriel and Freddy, and Fritz in Foxy. He's using the Spring Bonnie suit to lure them, kill them, and stuff them into a suit. But nothing happens. There's no reaction. And at this point, people are starting to investigate the location, so he's running out of time. So he tries one more, and he takes Cassidy. And he realizes maybe it wasn't graphic enough. Maybe it wasn't violent enough. So he puts Cassidy into Fredbear's suit, the Springlock suit, and activates the Springlocks. Horrifically killing Cassidy, shredding their body, just terrible, terrible thing. Hoping that agony will cause a reaction. But still, there's no visible possession by the time that Freddy's is closed via the investigation. But whether William was too desperate or too short-sighted, he didn't realize that because Freddy's is a publicly traded company, if it closes, its assets are retained by the shareholders, aka all of those animatronics are kept lock and key by the people who funded the restaurant, and William can no longer observe them or have access to them. He has these perfect test subjects, and he's not even allowed to look at them now. But he does manage to frame Henry for the missing child incident, getting him locked into prison, and hopefully for the rest of his life. Now Henry's out of the way, and no one will believe him if he tries to confess what happened with Circus Baby's Pizza World. Now it's during this time when the animatronics are kept by the shareholders that Charlotte, as the marionette, helps the missing child incident victims possess their suits. My best guess as to where they're being held is likely still at Freddy's, right? Every time the Freddy's place closes in the series, the animatronics are just kind of left there, right? You see this in the Silver Eyes, we see this in Fetch, in a lot of other, anytime a Freddy's closes, they just leave the animatronics there. So my best guess is when the shareholders took the assets, they just kept the building and kept everything inside it, locked it, hired a security guard. And they obviously, William can't sneak in, break in, be that security guard, because the shareholders know who William is. But this is where we get those FNAF 2 hallucinations in between nights, where it's Freddy looking back and forth, eventually the animatronics look at him, eventually Golden Freddy looks at him, and eventually the puppet looks at him. I think this is what was actually, what we see in Give Gifts, Give Life, I think is what we're seeing in these hallucinations. It's the puppet going up to these animatronics, guiding the spirits to them so they can find their bodies and get their memories back. Because again, in Alone Together, if your body's undiscovered, you don't have your memories. And if you don't have your memories, you wander around the places you were when you were alive, not realizing you're dead. We see in The Fourth Closet that the missing child incident victims, until they are told what's going on, think they're just playing at Freddy's with their funny bunny friend. They don't know what's going on. So Charlotte is there to take their hand, show them their body, and their memories come back. And when their memories come back, they're able to better possess the animatronics, they're able to know what's going on and hopefully take vengeance for themselves. all except for one person. The crying child. Dave's spirit is still at this location wandering, and Charlotte finds him, holds his hand, is like, I'll help you, but his body isn't here. They don't know where his body is, so he's never able to receive his memories. He still doesn't know what's really going on. From his perspective, his friends, his plush toys from his room, are back again. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, and even his best friend, his little psychic friend Fredbear. But to them, they just see this lost, crying boy who they can't help yet. I'm going to do some math to see where we're at in the recording. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I think we've passed 40 minutes, which this is a good place to stop. It's right at 1985. Things are going to start moving a little differently because we're going to move on to FNAF 2. And start going into all that mess. So this is a good spot to take a break. I had questions prepared, but I might not do questions for the next couple episodes to get this through. But hey, we did 6 slides of FNAF Timeline. I am really happy with how this timeline came along. And we will continue working on this in the next podcast episode, starting with FNAF 2. We're not even at FNAF 1 yet, baby. But that's the FNAF timeline. The majority of it happens before any of the games. Anyway, but as always, thank you for visiting the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. We hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.